folks. I know how to whistle to a dog. But not all the dogs are listening. So, anyway, welcome back. We're now into this is our penultimate session, I think that's the word. And we're ready to go, working right up to lunchtime. It's great that so many are still with us. It's usually the case that we see a few dropping off. So, without any further ado, can we start the next session? And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Justin Kenrick. And this is another of our community landowner spotlights. We started off with a very, very interesting one. So here we are to listen and to hear about Action Porty. So please welcome Justin.
Thank you. It was suggested by Andy, no less, that I could summarise this as we got together, we bought a Belfield Old Parish Church, the end. So I could make it a bit longer if you like. I think what's happened in Porty is kind of probably similar to elsewhere in Scotland in the sense that there's been, or at least what we've been hearing in the room, of community efforts that have been really effective, have been very successful, but in a context of asset stripping, of the Church of Scotland selling off its assets for as fast as it can, and the police selling off their stuff, and the councils getting rid of their stuff, and a concentration of land ownership happening, and a economic system that is just insane, that priorities growth as opposed to actually what we need, and growth being let's grow the cake so we don't have to share it fairly. And the consequence of growing that cake means destruction of the environment. We all know that. So I just want to highlight that when I'm describing some success here, it's in that context of really quite a drastic situation where in Portobello we've had our churches being taken away, and lots of churches being taken away, and all of those were spaces that people used and needed in all sorts of other ways as church halls. Our town hall was being threatened with being taken away, and now it's our police station. So I want to go through that. We've had success, but it is in that larger context of we need a very different system than the one we've got. And I suggest we need one based on communities, not based on large corporations in hock with governments. And I guess, in terms of community land in Scotland, I would love us, and we've discussed it I think with David and others, it'd be lovely to have an event on 10,000 years of community ownership and hundreds of years of divided rural ownership. Actually 10,000 years of community lands really rather than ownership, of actually just communities living on lands, belonging to lands, caring for their lands, rather than it being about ownership in a way. Anyway, I'm supposed to give a talk on Action Porty. I'll do that now.
In 10 minutes.
10? I thought I had 5. Whoa, I'll go on for another 5 minutes now. No. So the basic situation you could describe as being Portobello is seaside community next to Edinburgh on the Forth. Population of about 12,000, but growing rapidly. There are large barracks housing and other housing going in, kind of dormitory accommodation around Portobello, so the numbers are increasing, and then community spaces are vanishing in that context. And it's a place where we previously tried to get a turbine going, so we put a lot of effort into a lot of initiatives, right? I'm going to tell you about ones that have succeeded. There are a lot before that didn't succeed. And there's just something about the amount of work you have to do to make this stuff succeed. And somebody this morning from Kenrick talking about being happy to fail, like needing to be able to put the work in, being okay about failing, learning from it. But in this situation with Belfield, which is the building on the left there, the church building there, that was clearly going to vanish because the Church of Scotland was going to merge 3 churches in Portobello, so 2 of those would be lost to the community. They go for high-end housing, which is what one of them is now. One of them has become million pound homes. So we pushed to say Belfield. We were in communication with the church from about 2013, and it was only in 2016 that they actually said they were going to be selling it. So, and then they were trying to rush the process. Luckily, the Community Empowerment Act came into force, so it was 2015, but it came into force April 2016, at exactly the same time as our first community meeting about trying to save Belfield. So we were very lucky, and I think luck is quite a crucial bit in this process, by the way. So we had a meeting to kind of get people galvanised around that, and people were very galvanised already. It's a place that they'd got married in, they'd had their kids going to woodcraft or scouts or guides or whatever else. They had lots of kids' parties, lots of funerals. It's a place that really matters to people. Built in 1805. It's a very the new halls in it, new from 1960s. All of that paid for by the people of Portobello. So it was paid for by the community, then the church owns it, then the church wants to sell it, taking it out of community hands, and that's just like asset stripping, I would suggest. My dad was a Church of Scotland minister, right, so I've got nothing against them, but that was asset stripping. So we had the meeting, we then galvanised from that, we managed to go door to door, we've got about 40 of us going door to door throughout Portobello, getting support. We had 25% of the population signing up, of the much smaller area that we defined as our community area, for purposes of the Act. We had about 1,500 people signing up to say they wanted to save the building for the community. And we had a community ballot, 97.8% of people backing us, and we successfully took over the building with a grant from the Scottish Land Fund, £600,000 it cost us. We had 94% of that covered by the SLF. We had to raise the rest. We've since paid off those loans. So that was great. And for me, the key thing, and for others, the key thing was we had a real big split in the community before this. Edinburgh Council wanted to build a new school on the park, and this was really divisive. Most people wanted it to be on the park. Other people didn't want it to be on the park, wanted it to be somewhere else rather than on the park, and it was a huge division in the community. And so this project wasn't just about saving community space. It was also about bringing people together from both sides, bringing the community together to do something positive rather than feeling divided and hating each other, which happens. I don't know about your communities, probably never happens, but in ours it does happen. People get into that state. So it was a kind of positive initiative to bring people together. So that was great, and that was successful, and it's really, really well used. And I should maybe refer to the bit at the bottom there, which is that we had a community share offer over the month of April this year to raise the funds for transforming the old building. So you can see the bottom left there of those little tiny impossible to see pictures. That's the inside of the building, and we want to put in a mezzanine floor so that it's not got, at the moment, if you're upstairs, all you could see is the minister in his pulpit. You wouldn't even be able to see people on the floor there. It's designed for God to speak to you and not for people to be doing anything else interactive amongst themselves. So we wanted to raise money to put in a floor there so the upstairs can be a performance, weddings, whatever space, and underneath can be really versatile, because we have many more demands on the space than we can provide. I mean, we work financially, it adds up. We employ 4 people from very few hours to 30 hours. It works, it's financially solvent, but we wanted to raise the money to be able to transform the space. 3 weeks in, we still hadn't got to our minimum target. We didn't have our minimum target. It was going to have to all go back to people. We wanted to raise £200,000, what we were aiming for. 100,000 would be fine, and that would release 450,000 from the UK government fund, 150,000 from philanthropists. We'd borrow money. It would stack up to the £750,000 that we needed. So three weeks in, still weren't there. There was real fear. And then in the last week, I kept on bumping into people on the street who were going, I must remember to get my share. Like, people were really keen. Like, it wasn't like, I will give you a donation. And the share is something you can take back after 5 years, 6 years. I don't think many people will, but you can take it back at that point. And it was amazing, just that shift to people kind of wanting to have ownership, to declare their ownership, to declare this belongs to me, is what it felt like. So it's one thing to put your cross on a vote and say, yes, I'd like this to be community ownership. It's another thing to spend 25 quid or 50 quid or 100 quid to get 1, 2 or 4 shares. And that was quite extraordinary. So we ended up with 168,525. There aren't many numbers I remember, but that's how many pounds worth of shares we got. People buying in. And so now we can go ahead. We can push ahead with now the next bit of impossible work. And we have an extraordinarily effective board. I have to say it's a very well-resourced community in terms of that. It's got really good people who are really effective on the board in a really range of ways, like right the way through. But I expect most communities have that once you look. We were just talking about one nearby at a talk that you were at that I gave ages ago. And this person saying, like you can see they've got resources we haven't, but actually I've met them since, and he's found the people who have the resources, they've been effective in their place too. So it's always, places look resourceful when people come out of the woodwork and connect, but they're there, so it's like allowing them to come through and supporting them to come through. That's Belfield. We had then a business where the Edinburgh Council wanted to sell 5-a-side football pitches, the Edinburgh Power League, and these football pitches are really crucial. They're a crucial part of the community, they're crucial for all ages, they're really, really vital spot. And the way that we kind of fought that off was by not fighting it off, was by kind of welcoming it and saying, great, you want to do something that raises funds for Edinburgh Council? Fine, great. What can we do that can keep as much of the pitches as possible, that can provide you with some kind of income stream, and that can provide the community with more resources than they have already there? And that was very effective, partly because lots of people opposed us. So we had a vote within the community, and 51% of people in the community backed our plans for working with Edinburgh Council to redevelop it in a way that would keep enough football pitches, but also allow them to get some income stream, community to get other benefits. 41% were against it, which was great. They didn't want to lose pitches at all. Yeah? So when we were negotiating with Edinburgh Council, we were saying, well, you can work with us, we can make this work together, or really people only voted for the 51% voted for this because they thought this might work, but otherwise they're all going to go that way. Only 8% have voted for your plans. Yeah. So there's something about using 1 minute. I haven't even begun.
We'll have 2 minutes for questions, so you can add on then whatever you don't get in your talk.
Okay, so I guess the key two points then. So one is Action Porty wasn't the body that then saved the town hall. Those were other folk. Action Porty felt overwhelmed by what we were doing at that time. We couldn't stretch that far. Some people on the board joined the group that then saved the town hall. There's something about not being jealous of other organisations and supporting them. So you're working together with others. Somebody recently from a body I won't mention was, when we're trying to get the police station now, she was saying another community body might go for it. And it was like, great! If they go for it, that's fantastic. So just something about being really focusing on community rather than the organisation. So organisations matter, but they aren't the community. The community is all those people, and the community are individuals stepping forward, like Al with the solar panels, sponging them down there. But it's individuals stepping forward, making community that really works. And I guess the last thing I'd want to say around that is just that I've got these 4 things in my head, right, of what makes things work. And one is hard work, but work that you like. So you've got to enjoy this stuff. If you enjoy it, then you can put the hard work in even when it doesn't work. The other is relationship building, making sure you've got a really good team of people working on something, but also relationship building with people who really don't like you. That's the key bit. I'm talking about in communities. 95% of the work is within the community, and not being offended by somebody hating you for doing what you're doing, really wanting to link with them and connect with them. That relationship building is key, and in the end they give up and they like you. And that's my experience. It takes years. It takes years, but you get there if you're genuine. And the other 2 points there, so it's hard work, relationship building, and but you're making me forget it now. Jesus.
It'll come. It'll come.
Okay. Well, the 4th one, I can't remember what the 3rd one was. Well, the 3rd one was just imagining things can be different. People all say, no, you can't do that. You can do that if you get in there and do that. And the 4th one is luck. And that is really crucial. But you can ask me a question about that.
No, stay with me, Jason. Genuinely, our time is tight, so
Yeah,
we're just going to wait here before I hand over to the next lot. So, can I just say, I'm not rushing you because I don't want to listen to you, because I think your story, as you've just presented it, is really motivational, and I think that's what a big part of what this conference is all about. Really, it is. And you know what happens in Porty. I've been to Porty, and I've listened to you in Porty. So I suddenly realised what I was up against today, and nicely, of course. But it did, you know, you go to Porty, it's completely different from where I live. And that night I realised that in the eyes of that old man from New Haven, it was completely different from where he lived, which was what, as the crow flies, not even 5 miles away. So, having heard all that, we don't have time for me to invite questions, but is there a final point that you would like to leave us with?
That's very kind.
I'm giving you that.
That was kind. Okay, so just about luck, right? I work in East Africa with indigenous peoples, trying to help them secure the rights to their land. And they have a very strong sense of connectedness to land, and that the land's on your side. So for us, that may sound like voodoo, because we're taught that, you know, the guys in charge are people on top of corporations, governments. When you get that sense that things are opening up to you as you open up to each other, then luck happens. And that sounds like voodoo, but it's not. And you know that from your personal lives, when you met the person who you love or whatever else. Coincidence happens and is the fundamental of life, and that coincidence isn't by chance. Luck's not by chance. That's all. Leave you with that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Justin. Okay, can we move swiftly? The next lot. Where are you, Catherine? Off the steps. So, I'll let Josh go straight into this and introduce your panel.
Yeah. Thanks, Agnes. Hi, everyone. Agnes, are you sitting as well?
Yeah.
You're quite finished, Sally. Great. So this is the final session before Agnes just has some closing thoughts. We thought it'd be nice to have quite an informal panel reflecting back on the conference, thinking about the opening plenary, some of the themes there, and getting a newly constructed panel. If any of you look at your programs, it's quite a different makeup. So my thanks to the panel who agreed at various points of late last night or a couple of days ago to take part. I'm going to ask the panel to share some kind of couple of minutes each or a few minutes each reflections on the conference, any themes that have emerged for them. I've got some thoughts as well, but I'm very keen that this is about you joining that discussion as well, so it's not going to be us on stage talking loads. I do want questions in from you once we've heard from the panel. The esteemed Agnes Rennie is also going to be at the end and will no doubt chip in. So on the panel, we've got Lucy Beattie, who's a farmer in Otherpool and also a researcher on land and the just transition, and is one of the relatively newly appointed land commissioners. We've got Catherine McPhee, who very kindly agreed to do this last night over a drink, who is an archivist and activist in Skye, and we have Megan MacInnes, who has a long career in land reform internationally and in Scotland, is a former land commissioner, is the development manager in Applecross, and is also a CLS board member. And then we have Agnes. Who we all know and love. So without further ado, that's enough from me. Lucy, could I invite you to?
Yes. Is it functional? Okay. Gamaleshkel, Habekana Gaelic, is Michelle Speety, Hashina Lochroom, Balabu, Amigo Bamansara, Keka, James Hutton Institute, Agus, answer Commissioner, answer sort of Land Commission. So apologies, I don't speak much Gaelic, but seeing the signs around, I felt I had to say a wee bit. My name's Lucy, I'm from Lochroom, and as Josh said, I recently minted Land Commissioner, which is a great honour, and it's fantastic to be here today, and thank you very much for all the presentations. So I guess like looking back and looking forward, a few small things I've taken from today and from yesterday was particularly attending some of the sessions yesterday with yourself, Catherine, like about the kind of connecting with the source of oppression and working as a community and sort of looking at the timelines of oppression, resistance, radicalisation, and then progressive reform. And I think that's an iterative process. Sorry, this mic has got some issues. So apologies for that. And I think that some things that came out were about the cultural understandings in that respect, and how there has been activity, but at the moment there's a wee bit of vacuum, that cultural activity, and I think that would be something that would be really exciting to connect with. And I heard a bit about the land walk, the Just Walks, which is happening later on in the back end of this year, and I'd be really keen to join in with that. The archiving, songs, creation, the idea of 1,000 houses across 100 communities in the Northwest, I really like that. And the shared of energy generation projects. So these are all really exciting things, and it kind of invigorates everyone around. I'm certainly feeling very invigorated despite being in Big Fire last night till 10:30, which is late for me. And then I got up this morning quite early because, like us all, we talk about volunteer fatigue, and I'm also a volunteer. I'm a trustee of Clachan Lochbroom, which was a Church of Scotland property and has been owned by the community for a few years now, but to input on a funding application that we're all trying to get over the line for Monday morning. So this is the life that we all lead, and I think that everyone has to be really appreciative. So looking forward, where do we get our energy? Where are we going? I certainly can think about things that will be in my personal life, but from a land commission perspective, we've recently launched a conversation, Scotland Future, which you may have seen a bit about on social media or seen posts about the place, and we will be going around various places. I certainly know I'll be going to the Black Hat show and probably up to Wigan, Caithness and various other places to talk to folk, but there's an opportunity to engage and submit your vision of what would a land reform Scotland look like. And I thought, goodness, is that, do people think, was that a visioning exercise? But I think from my perspective as a social scientist, we're looking at what is a social norm. So what first inspired me to get interested in land reform was back in '99. I was a student at Harper Adams Agricultural College in England, and coming from West Ross, I was very used to going up to the hills for a walk, and I sort of went for a walk down a farm track very carefully and was told to go back and not to walk there anymore. And I thought that's strange because, walking is allowed where I come from, and then it was being formalised by the Concordat and Access. So that was actually something that inspired me to do my undergraduate dissertation on that. Was like the first land reform bill. And I think what has risen in discussions here is about the cultural norms that are now accepted as norms. So community land ownership is a norm. Access and rights of access, responsibilities of access is a norm too. But how does a land reform Scotland become a norm in the sense of the social, political and economic frameworks? And that's, I think, what this conversation that the Land Commission is encouraging people to get involved with is about. And clearly that will lead towards a mandate or some kind of document be presented before the next parliamentary session in Scotland in 2026. So I encourage you to get involved with that if you can get through the volunteer fatigue and do yet another thing, but I'd really like to hear from folks and get your input. So thank you.
Thank you.
Does that work?
Oh, you just tap the.
I don't know. Don't know, giving me a microphone's a good idea.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Reflections. I obviously got invited to join this panel last night, so thank you very much for that. And also just being here at the Community Land of Scotland conference. It's not something as an archivist you often get asked to do. My own impressions were it's all going to be policy and chat, but I've had a great 2 days. So last Saturday, thanks to Ian Craig, this is why Anne and myself were here, we were setting up the 100 Years exhibition at the Archive Centre. So I feel like I've been discussing Community Land Scotland all week with people, and it's been really interesting. And I wanted to share a quote that somebody left in the visitors book. And they came in on Wednesday, and we were quite busy, and I felt like I didn't give them enough time to speak to it, but they were happy with headphones on, watching, looking at everything. And they left in the book, we were very touched by the exhibition, especially the walking sticks. We felt recognised and seen for what I've done and achieved in my lifetime. Thank you. I was like, oh. So I said to Ian, and I was like, this is so important. This is somebody reacting to a creative response from the movement of Community Land Scotland, all the input from different communities, and how important that their personal story was reflected on Community Land Scotland's work. A lot over the last couple of days, I've been thinking about, I've been learning from you, everyone here, the different sessions that we've been doing, but yesterday with the question that was put to us about the appetite for community ownership. And I was thinking about, community apathy, how do we teach people? And maybe it is more storytelling, sharing, more creative outputs from different communities, having the ability to tour an exhibition across the Highlands. There was a conversation I was just having a moment ago. How can we get these projects that are maybe created in Dumfries up Caithness, up to Assynt, over to the Western Isles, up to Shetland? How can we facilitate to keep the conversations going? So in another 25 years, we've purchased and increased that percentage of community-owned land in Scotland. So that's a few takeaways for me. Also, I felt really I was excited about energy community benefit funds. That might section for learning about what the possibilities for energy in Scotland. So I feel being in Skye and the thought of 220-metre high wind turbines coming, it feels quite scary, but the possibilities of how we can support ourselves, but Scotland, and lift people out of poverty and into a better situation. So there's a lot of today and yesterday that's reminded me that we're not alone in the different challenges. There's evidence from groups on different ways we are healing and feeding and fixing from within. We just need to encourage new areas of growth for community to do that. And just remember that people are the core of what we do. Yeah.
Far away.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's really nice. It's fantastic as always to be at this conference, even though now it's raining. I feel like I've been at two different events because on the one hand, we've had, as usual, incredible presentations and stories from different community groups across Scotland doing incredible things. It's been really inspiring. Loads of stories, loads of connections and things. We've heard about the way in which community landowners are becoming key partners in other things. The Natural Capital Community Partnership Project is really, really exciting. It's not without its risks, but I think the risks also make it really exciting because it's stretching our understanding of what we can do as community landowners, and it's really pushing at barriers which I think people haven't been willing to do before. So that's really exciting. We've heard loads about community-led housing projects, and we've heard from Josh about the progress that Josh and Linsay and all the team about the progress that Community Land Scotland has made in the last 12 years and all the achievements towards policy objectives. And that's been really exciting, and as ever, it's been really, really. But we've also heard about just how it's actually getting harder on the ground to progress any of this stuff. What Sandra said at the very beginning session about how communities are too busy stepping up to deliver public services to be able to actually even consider taking on buyout opportunities really struck a chord with me. I feel like I spend all my time delivering public services in Applecross, can't focus really properly on delivering houses. We've seen concentration of land ownership get worse in recent years, and we're seeing the community benefit payments being the same. I hadn't realised it's 35 years that benefit payment has remained the same. It's shocking. It's really, really shocking. And I think that these are just a number of examples where, in fact, wealth and power structures, which were intended to be challenged and overcome through land reform, have remained virtually unimpacted by land reform. And I'm saying that as a previous land commissioner, that I think we have to be realistic actually about what we have achieved in this kind of incremental, progressive approach to land reform, when in fact, I agree with what many people have been saying, that we need something much more radical. I mean, we need something which is much more long-term and ambitious and actually moves us at speed towards a complete change in how we are structuring power and control over land in urban and rural areas across the whole of the country. So there's a huge amount that I've taken away as a board member for CLS that we're going to think about, and think immediately about election manifestos and the opportunities that the next 12 months will provide us, but also more longer term thinking as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks for those contributions, which were, considering how late you are, absolutely phenomenal. Thanks very much. There's a couple of themes or points I want to raise, and then would really like questions from the floor. Please feel free to jump in as well. So a couple of things, actually picking up on the point Megan was just making there. There's been a lot of talk around how it came up in the opening plenary. How do we build the kind of political impetus, the fire, the political imagination that was swirling around pre-devolution that fired the land reform movement in the first place? And how do we find the kind of the language and visioning to do that, to think structurally and to think radically beyond this kind of incremental change that Megan's been thinking about? And part of that, I think, is about how we engage with our history, how we engage with our lineage, and how we find a way of looking back to progressively forward. And I was at the SLE conference on Wednesday, and there's a lot of talk there about how land reform is all about the politics of envy, it's all about looking back at historic reviews. And I think we need to find a way of using that history in a constructive, progressive, forward-looking way that informs what we're doing and creates some of this kind of political fire and emphasis in a way that is progressive and constructive, but we have to be informed by that history. The second point that I wanted to talk about and maybe get a response to was around economics. Peter spoke about it. We also need these economic arguments. We need to talk about how fundamental restructuring land ownership in Scotland would be a huge economic exercise, redistribute wealth, create a huge amount of opportunity for people, and part of that narrative, I think, is picking up the community talked from earlier about communities being businesses, but business doesn't need to mean the kind of extractive capitalism that we associate it with. That actually you can have businesses that are creating wealth and that wealth is staying locally and circling locally, and that is part land reform agenda. How we weave together these really powerful narratives to foster that kind of structural change that you're talking about. And that's going to be an ongoing project, but that's sort of one takeaway. And the church of Scotland is coming up as well, but that's has the panel got anything they want to add before we go to them? Have we got any questions on the floor or comments? Yeah. Just behind.
Andrew Williamson from Slate Community Trust. I want to just carry on from where Megan kind of finished. And what you just said, Josh, the policy of envy needs to change into a policy of aspiration. But we're stuck in this risk-based culture where the conversation starts with no, or everything is difficult. How do we shift both the policy debate and the political debate, but also the community debate, to be about a policy of aspiration and a policy of aims? There's no good us talking about it, we've got to do it. So what's the first step that we have to take to make that happen?
Great question.
I think this is it, because we can't be inspired. Sorry, can you hear me? I think that shift from policy of envy to policy of agency and aspiration and inspiration is based on inspiration from what others are doing. And I think coming together and hearing what we're all up to and looking back together and imagining the future together is the key step from that. I know that every single one of us has gone away with things we're going to follow up with people afterwards, and conversations we're going to continue. And I think that has to be the starting point. After that, it's up to all of us, I guess. So we'll see in 2 years, not next year.
I'm not sponsor.
I could try. I think there's kind of a strange ferocity between communities and policy, and certainly in regard, when we were in one session about community energy as well, somebody speaking to other folks and saying, oh yeah, we've got these issues as well, and it is capacity, and some communities have more capacity than others. I'm lucky to say in my area we have a lot of capacity, but then you look across fence, literal metaphorical fence at neighbours, and they don't. So why is policy not stepping in to ensure that there's a level playing field for every single community, regardless of your capacity? And one of the points of discussion today raised by Lauren was about the community land with HIE, which had sort of advocated and provided that protective framework for communities before, and then we see that there's there's a trajectory where large projects are not happening as much as they did. So we have to admit that and say, this is why, and now we need to make the measures to ensure that policy has that greater porosity with the community.
Picking again some of the stuff in that opening plenary, this is about making sure the community are taking it seriously. And if that happens, then it moves from being kind of cycling environment to an enabling environment, because communities are seen and trusted as, economic drivers, generating loads of social benefits. They're not just, the fluffy thing around the edges. They're actually they could be the heart of a much more progressive economic system. So it's part of kind of building that story, but the story is what's needed to kind of to win some of the political arguments, but the work that everyone's doing is part of building that narrative. The stories that everyone has demonstrates the communities are doing this work. We need to take it seriously, but we are in a kind of cycling environment at the moment where everything's a no, everything comes back to kind of funding. There's no money for that. So how we shift away from that is one of the key challenges. Justin and John. Ian's.
Thank you. Yeah, no, just a question for that. We're just thinking, it seems to me that community land, we can get pretty stuff like a little large of it. like a few percent. It's this small thing over there. It can't really be. How can you get equitable benefit for communities? All the benefits should be for communities. There shouldn't be equitable benefit. But who else is taking benefit and why? Why are they getting all the funds based on what on earth this resource about? And I think the challenge is more for ourselves. That if community is the solution, then we have to do the work of community to build a community, which is building ability to work together, and then claiming the whole damn lot. Actually, it's not the community is the solution to all the large problems, rather than being like how we fix it and get a little bit of benefit from these large systems. Those large systems are destroying the planet, and they're destroying. And so economic growth and all the kind of craziness. So when you talk about local businesses, absolutely, you know, people being able to be employed, being able to. And we had 31 local businesses investing in Belfield just now, which was great. That was local businesses saying, yes, we support you, we support community venture in that way. But I just wonder whether we need to up our ambition in that sense. So rather than, we're getting lots of no's. So the response to that shouldn't be, oh, we've got to shrink. The response to that should be, okay, you haven't got it. You haven't understood what we're doing. What we're doing is something huge here. Just a step.
So also slightly that speaks to the conversation I had all day with Tom and Polly about the need for kind of structural arguments and a political imagination that challenges the neoliberal consensus, which is just draining on politics of any ambition and any kind of imagination. And actually, as you say, just the community provides the means of answer for some of these things. There is a different way of doing things. We have a different way of doing things, and it works. It delivers on a number of different problems. It's just mainstream. It's not something like the edge. Core to what we're going to do. So, want to start, Andy, if you have.
It might just probably I mean, for a lot of arguments, we can run problems and also move something off. And as I said, the political here, not really I don't expect it. And then the working groups stopped and then it was going down the hand. So I suppose my question looking back and forward, do you think the political system, I don't just mean politics in the system, is serious about the kind of vision that England's got a lot of achieve?
Anyone on that? Catherine,
Um, um, for many reasons, partly because I think, you know, community land ownership as a model has been sidelined, it's not taken seriously, partly because it's itself as a movement hasn't been good at demonstrating its economic impact. I think there's been a huge amount of talk at the national level in policy and legislative frameworks about community wealth building, for example. But when we see the draft community wealth building bill, there's nothing in that of any substance that's going to change anything. So I think there is a huge amount of work to be done. I think the Scotland Futures initiative that the Land Commission is launching is hugely exciting because it's changing the direction of this. It's setting a goal and then working backwards rather than trying to think about the incremental changes we can make. And I'm really excited about that. You know, the big land question that was launched by Revive has also been doing a similar thing in trying to sort of capture the public imagination about why land reform is important and how it can be delivered. But I think we have a long way to go, as I said, to address the structural reasons why some of these big inequalities of power and control over land remain in place despite 20, 30 years of devolution and land reform.
I think that, I mean, I don't really get into politics much myself, but I know it's come up a lot, and people are like, "Oh, she's mentioning it again." But this idea of something like the Land League, you know, a different political movement that works for communities, and incorporate just all the work that's been done the last 100 years and before, and that idea of like going back to go forward. You know, you have to get out and share the stories. I've learned so much in the last 2 days from all across Scotland and what communities have achieved and what can be done. And it's made me kind of think, right, up in North Sky, we need to push, but we need to show them what's happened across the rest of Scotland and what the future might look like there. And maybe with the backing of more stuff from the government, a new political party, a political movement to support this, it's got to be done. And it's back to something that we're chatting about in a few different groups. The idea of like political education needs to come into that for people, to get some younger people involved. Sharing and giving stories is going to be key to keep this going and to get more land into community ownership. That's what I was kind of picking up and chatting with people around.
Can we have one more question at the back? Let's have someone who's not asked a question before. Sorry to
Quick one.
A very quick one.
Miles, your child. Sorry, Katrina. The 100 years back, I wondered if the plan of mentioning their vision for the next 100 years. And I asked that as a, well, I'm interested, I'm curious, but I'm also quite struck by land reform is a huge thing, and the community ownership, but one part of that. And I'm curious if you want to think about their kind of vision for the next 100 years.
I've got first.
Well, I think that when you see land as a finite resource and we're facing crises, people crisis, particularly where I am, and climate, also loss of biodiversity. And I think loss of biodiversity is something that concerns me in the greatest level. So I think any form of political cycle has to kind of be reinforced by the overarching aims of land reform policy. And, you know, again, the radicalisation, but to make that a progressive future in 100 years, not you.
I think, well, obviously, yeah, in building our house for 100 years time, they're looking at like almost 200 years of community land ownership. But like one of the first I would see the place just populated. It's not just once upon a time people lived here, and this is what they did in Liverpool does. It shows people, place, culture survived, and the community land ownership is just a normal. We're not fighting massive landowners, we're not fighting historic clan chiefs for scraps of land. It's just a norm that that's the time we go back stuff. The community go, we need a wind turbine from every energy we're using. It's just a norm. This just happens. But ultimately, just about future, dare I say it, on the bed in Scotland.
I think in 100 years, I'd like to see more land in community ownership across the whole of Scotland in different types of models. You know, we have community ownership, you know, a la, land reform compliant community ownership groups, but there are other models out there. There are cooperatives, there's hybrid models. We need that democratic control and accountability and transparency around land being held at community level.
Great, thank you.
I don't slap you down, Josh. Come on. God, he's never going to allow me to forget that. Thank you, everyone, very much. I'm going to say a couple of words really quickly because lunch is waiting and already I can see people heading for ferries and things. So, Roots to Resilience was the topic, was the title for this topic. And, you know, at first I thought, Roots to Resilience? But it was ideal because it's embraced where we've come from, it's thinking about where we are, and most certainly it's made us think about how we nurture moving forward. And that's just the kind of things these guys have been talking about. Yesterday, in one of the sessions, in fact it was your session, Catherine, Andy Whiteman put us all in our place by explaining that however much we might have admired and looked back with fondness on the 784 production of the Cheviot, the Stag and the Blackback Oil, and it was a brilliant production, actually thinking that 7% of the population awfully owned 84% of the land was not even true. It's far less than that. And that hasn't changed. In fact, it's got worse. So thank you, Andy, for that. Although we don't always agree, we do most of the time. And I think it's really useful to be right on that little statistic because it's knowing that kind of information. It's picking up these things in these kind of sessions that makes us rethink our own narrative. It makes us think about our own history. And we've been doing a lot in Galston recently on that because we've taken last year the opportunity to think about 100 years of our own village in Ingolson Township, but that's not about the history of envy or the history of retribution, because that gets you nowhere. It's about rather learning from that process that people have worked through, have come through, and have taken us to where we are today, where the whole land is in community ownership. But it's tiny, the amount of land that's in community ownership across Scotland, whether that be buildings in Porty or whether it be the Isle of Egg. It doesn't matter. In the scheme of things, it's so small and it could be much, much bigger. But what about the last 2 days? It's done what this conference always does, in my opinion. It's brought people together, it's shared experience, it's given us motivation from experiences that maybe and places we haven't been able to visit and now most definitely want to find out more about. But also, as far as CLS is concerned, we're a membership organisation. We exist to work for and represent our members, to advocate on behalf of our members and those people who want to be part of this movement. And so the work that Sally, that Josh, that Linsay and the whole team, the very small team, let me say, that makes up CLS are doing, it's about that. It's about working for you and with you, and the with you bit is hugely important. One of the most exciting things that in my own immediate experience at the moment that's going on is not just what we're doing at Urasaurak Housing, it's about what we're doing with Urasaurak Varavash and about Urasaurak Chalmers. Some of you were in that workshop yesterday and heard about the big project we're doing on renewables. But that's not the first project we've done together. So it's not just about trust and community trust and what we can do ourselves, it's what we can do with others. So looking at where we can go from here, about actually nurturing these roots to resilience, it's never about working on our own. It's about working with others, and it's about finding these ways of taking these big ideas forward, whether it be politics, whether it's be money, whatever. And it doesn't come easy. And we heard some really good reflections yesterday from those who've been at the table for a long time, but are able to reflect on that experience really through a prism that informs today. And so the whole thing, thank you all very much for that. And thanks to a number of others too. Thanks to the team who've brought these whole 2 days together, who've made it run smoothly. Thanks to Solmo Rostek for looking after us, giving us nice comfortable beds, those of you who've stayed here, and very, very nice food over the couple of days. Thanks to all of you for coming, because without you coming, there would be no conference. And that's just a fact. Thanks to those who've joined us online. There have been a few of them. I've no idea what the numbers are. 1 or 2, Mick? Yeah?
7 people currently watching.
Oh my God. Those of you watching online, I address you now. Thank you for being with us. Thanks to our sponsors. We've done this a couple of times, but again, without the sponsorship, we would not be able to have the conference comfortably, nicely, and enjoy some hospitality too. So, safe journey home. See you for a conference in 2 years' time, but definitely see you at some kind of event, some kind of initiative. Maybe we'll call on you in between times. Thank you all.